Hello everyone, we are live yet again, and this is one of my authors chats of the week, and as always I'll give it a moment or two to notify my co-hosts before we get going. We'll be talking about books, writing, publishing, and everything in between. This week's a short week for me because I am actually away this weekend, so traveling a little bit, and because of that I'm trying to scramble to make sure everything is as ready as possible and gearing up for my book release on Tuesday. So it's a little chaotic here. I see my co-host. We'll see if he sends the invite. But yeah, so that's my week. Hopefully all yours are doing well, and hopefully for everybody who's from Florida, they're out of the way of the storm that's coming in. Because having lived in New Orleans for a number of years, I totally respect, get out of Dodge. Hello, hello? I can hear you. I cannot see you for the moment. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I cannot see you.
All right. I'm on my way. I just put in some headphones here.
That's fine. That works. We are on time. And then we'll get going.
It's not connecting. Let's see.
It's okay. There's always some kind of early glitchy technical error. I feel like it takes always a moment for everything to get in sync for everything.
Right? Yeah. This is especially since this is my first one. Oh, here we go. There's my camera. All right. We'll have to go headphoneless. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. I was just saying right before you logged in that it's a short week for me. I'm actually traveling this weekend, so I'm scrambling because, of course, how everything lays out, I'm releasing a new novella on Tuesday, so I'm trying to make sure everything as ready as possible before I head out the door. And it's a chaotic sprint to the finish line. But yeah. How about yourself? Well, let me start off with the basics. For anybody who doesn't know you, you're my co-host this week. I mean, this is usually pretty conversational. If anybody who's listening chimes in with a bookish question, we'll try to answer it to the best of our abilities. But outside of that, we'll just be talking about books, and I'll let you introduce yourself and what you write.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Josiah, writing as J.D.L Rosell. I write epic fantasy primarily. I've done one lit RPG trilogy as well, but pretty much soundly in epic fantasy at the moment. I have about 16 novels, I think, and a few novellas on the side there. So yeah, been around since about 2016 publishing. So been here for a bit.
I love that, and that's about the same length as I've been out and around, so that's kind of fun. For you, it sounds like if you said about 16, 17 full lengths and a few novellas, it feels like you write several a year, so how is that? Like, how do you dedicate your time to your writing? Are you full-time, part-time author of 2 full-time jobs? Because some of us think that way.
Right, yeah, no. Fortunately, I've been able to be full-time at this for the last 3 years. So that is how it helps a lot for writing a lot,
Oh, yes. Yeah. I definitely agree. So, okay, with the fact that you split between, you have your lit RPG trilogy, which is a super popular genre right now, and then you write the rest in epic fantasy. What was it that made you just choose to, guess what? I'm going to write a book one day. I'm going to sit down and do it.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, we got to go way back for that. So, yes. I was in like those, I don't know what you call them where you are, but like it was like SEEK or EL, like the enhanced learning sort of things, programs. And through that, at 12, I wrote a little bitty novelette, right? And we got to like bind it and all that. So I probably since before then, obviously, because I wrote the book too, I've just always wanted to be an author. I always knew I wanted to be an author, and I was always writing in various genres. Like I did poetry for a long time, thought I was going to go to grad school for it. But the bug really bit me for novels in 2014, thereabouts, so my senior year of college. And I started drafting what later became my book, The Throne of Ice and Ash. But that took about 10 years to really get to publishing.
I know that.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that first one always takes just so long, which is good because you're like honing your craft, lots of drafts, really polishing it up. So nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I mean, that's basically the story for me.
I love that. Yeah, I kind of have a very similar vibe with you in the sense that for as long as I can remember, I've told stories, created characters, created backstories, and even when I was like, I have no idea what age, I was like, I'm going to write a book one day, and I just left out of that because it was going to happen. It was just my childhood mind. It was going to happen, and it doesn't matter how or when, it was just going to happen. And then whenever it got to the point where I was trying to make it happen, that's where I was like, wow, this is a little tough.
Yeah, I mean, but I feel like we're both fortunate that since you came in about 2016, right? Uh, we're both fortunate that indie publishing was already like kind of going at that point, right? Like it was still in that middle between stage where there's enough resources that you kind of have guidance for how to do it, right? But then there's not like now there's like a lot of books being published every single day. I forget what it's like thousands, right? So now there's like a lot of no, I mean it's a good thing. I love that people are putting their books out in the world, but like I feel like back in 2016 it was a little bit less crowded of a field. So and you could explore and make mistakes pretty easily. Like my first covers were not all that good, right? Like, I had some that were pretty decent, but like I made a lot of mistakes, and now to this point it's a lot easier to do it right. Whereas like now you have to like get it right coming out the gate. So it's I think a little trickier in some ways, though you have so many resources and like things to help you out.
I mean, there's so many pros and cons to that because I know when I was going through everything, I wish I had some of the technology that was here today. Totally. That when people start writing like today, it helps tremendously. But yes, because now there's so much of it out there and it is so, that much easier. There are that many more people there. So yes, in one sense, if you look at the numbers, it does get crowded out. Of course, the nice thing about readers, especially, there's so many that are so voracious. They'll read a couple books a day, like ridiculous. I am a slow reader. So for me, that's like just mind blowing. Yeah. And so the more authors put out stuff, they're still going to read it. They're going to get to it. And that's great. I wish I was like that. Unless you're one of my books, I am the slowest reader in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I read pretty slow too. Like I read decently fast, but like just like the pace of getting through a book. Yeah, I'm also with you. It takes me a while.
And I do see a comment popping up from Crystal. Hello, Crystal. It says, I'm an indie author as of this month. Congratulations. Yes. And I couldn't imagine 5 years ago that I would have gotten here. Yeah, it's wild. And like every day you blink and there's another platform and another thing to consider, think, maybe do. But what everybody has to realize, you don't have to do it all. There are so many options out there. You just have to figure out what works for you now and have a game plan. And if you want to expand, great. But figure out what works for you now. At least that's how I'm trying to approach it. I'm in the expansion, switching things around, figuring out where I want to go going forward. But
tell me more. I love hearing these sort of like pivot situations, right? Because I'm kind of at one of those as well. I mean, maybe you're always at a pivot situation, right? Because you kind of always have to be finding your way. But what are you thinking about right now? What are you changing?
Oh, some of it is just a lot of the background stuff in the sense of when I started out, I was exclusive through Zon because they paid the best and they still give you a lot of great perks for going exclusive. But because I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket and I want to try to reach readers that there are definitely groups of readers that won't touch that platform. That's why I'm moving wide. And so I'm moving ebooks and audiobooks, hopefully before the end of this year. And then next year, I'll try to figure out how to do the print wide. So that's one thing. But as far as writing, I'm challenging myself to do, I'm finishing up some of my longer fantasy series. So I'm starting to create duologies and standalones as I'm prepping for my future long-term ones, which each of them is pushing the boundaries of what I'm used to writing. Maybe it's I'm a single POV person, but now I'm going to be writing certain works with multiple POVs and stuff like that. So I'm changing how I'm always changing genres, all under the umbrella of fantasy.
Yeah.
Jumped that far. So for people like you who go from epic fantasy to lit RPG, that's a bigger step. Still, there's little overlap in certain themes and people, but that's a big jump. So what made you jump from epic to lit RPG to back to epic?
It was actually well, I guess that's true. It was epic fantasy first. So epic fantasy is kind of my main love. I wrote that first novel as my, what do you call it, dissertation sort of thing for my master's degree. And so it was kind of influenced in certain ways. I tried to be more literary with it, less commercial, which consequently had a effect on sales, because those are not tend to be as marketable. So I eventually unpublished that, not because I disliked the book at all. I like it, but I just wasn't going to continue it, and it was kind of a series starter. So then I pivoted because I wanted very hard to make sales. I pivoted to lit RPG because I saw that it was hot. It was just kind of still getting hot at that point. So it wasn't as crowded as it is now.
Simmering.
It was simmering, yeah. So I pivoted that. I like video games, so it felt like a natural fit. I play a lot of video games. I play a lot of RPGs, so it was just like, yeah, sure, I can totally do this. Just epic fantasy in a game world, right?
Exactly.
So that was a lot of fun. But I realized finishing that up, I was like, oh, but I really love epic fantasy. Yeah. So I just pivoted right back there.
Hey, and that's the fun thing is you can do whatever you want depending on once you finish a book. What's your next book? Are you going to continue that same series? Are you going to do what I do and always juggle multiple works, which gets complicated, everyone?
Yeah.
Or do you just switch between series and change things up? And you can do that. That's the fun thing is, especially when you're independent author, you're not necessarily as constrained as certain people who go trad, because once you're known for something, it's a little harder. I don't know. Maybe someone will jump in and be like, actually, it's easier. Who knows? I'm only India. That's all I know.
Yeah, I hear like this is always an interesting discussion. Like which confines you more, right? Indie versus trad. Which one is more like innovative as far as pushing the bounds of the genre? I've seen both, right? Probably the answer is that neither is neither, right?
Yeah.
So like you have Sunyi Dean, who wrote what is it called? Book Eaters. She had this podcast called The Publishing Rodeo. Has it, I still. And they talked about this sort of issue on there. And her conclusion was that trad was actually more innovative than indie. And that indie tended to find success when it stayed to sort of those tracks like traditional epic fantasy, sort of like Lord of the Rings stuff, which is what this series is kind of like. So I can totally see that. But then you see like a lot of indie books that are just like totally something that trad wouldn't be publishing, right? So yeah, I've seen both ways, and I think people can find success either way. Like, don't feel constrained by what people are saying.
Oh yeah, and that's what I think. One thing someone who's trying to break into the writing community needs to be aware is there is no one right way. And it may be something that's right for you, but that doesn't mean it's right for the next person. And so you just have to try to educate yourself the best and figure it out. And I actually know more and more authors who are hybridized, where they have certain works that are indie because they like certain aspects of that. And then they have certain works that are published traditional because they like some benefits of going that route as well. And so it all depends on you and what you want. How much, energy, effort, and what you want out of certain deals, and, case by case scenario.
100%. Yeah, and I mean, you can do multiple things at the same time, for better or worse, right?
For better or worse.
I do the same thing. As you talked about having multiple series and multiple books, right, that are going. I do the same thing, and I wish that my brain didn't work that way, but I have to do I have to mix it up. Are you the same way?
Oh, definitely, because I I love dabbling with different worlds and concepts and magic systems, and to stick to one all the way through, I feel like I would get a little, I don't know if it bored's the right word, but I definitely like being able to, okay, I wrote this project. While that one's going through editing, I'm going to jump into a totally different project world system and kind of keep things a little fresh and do that back and forth. And so I do like that for the most part. I just have to make sure, I reel in all the new shiny ideas and just say, okay, we're going to make an order of when you come, when it's your turn, but it's not now.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, and I do the same thing. It's like when it's in editing, what else are you going to do? You just got to keep writing. So you write something different. Yeah.
Exactly. So with you, okay, so if someone has never read any of your books before, which book or series would you recommend that's like, okay, this is a good first taste of me?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's two series. So one is I guess I can grab these down.
Yes, we love all the book covers. Show it.
Is this one? This is the special edition.
I know, it's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just got this sent to me recently because it just finished printing. So yeah, I'm still kind of like enamored with it. But yeah, so this is Legend of Tal. It's a 4-book series plus a novella, and it's funded. I just funded this one on Kickstarter. The second one's funding now. But yeah, this is a pretty good start to it if you like classic epic fantasy sort of stuff. So Lord of the Rings, milieu. Yeah, so there's this one, and then the other one is this guy, The Last Ranger. So this is my main ongoing series that I'm writing. I'm editing the 4th book right now. It'll be a 5-book series. And yeah, I think it's probably, well, authors always kind of have like their favorite stuff. I think this one's like better written per se. More people maybe love the other one, but this is kind of my go-to recommendation. But yeah, it has like a big titanic creatures called Titans, rampaging across the world. Then you have this fantasy ranger on a vengeance quest, turning into redemption and save the world sort of plot line. So yeah, The Last Ranger.
I love that. And you said there are 5 total. Have you written all 5, or you said that one you're still working on?
Yeah, so I'm editing book 4, and then I know book 5 is still coming. And I'm really like, so this is one occasion where I'm just like, I just want to jump right into writing book 5 because I'm so excited. But yeah, there'll be 5 books forthcoming.
Hey, I love that. And so the Legend of Tal series, you have that one completed. And you're about to complete this other one. So my question is, how do you handle saying goodbye to characters? Because again, I've had one completed series. I have another one that will be complete hopefully before the end of the year, unless something goes really awry. It's just a weird scenario and a weird feeling when you're like, oh, we're done.
Yeah. Well, so one solution is write a sequel series. So that's what I'm doing with this guy. I mean, some of the characters don't make, spoiler, some of the characters don't make it, right? So those obviously aren't reappearing, but at least you get to like revisit some of your old friends, right? And play with them and continue their stories in interesting ways. The other way, yeah, it's tough. When I know I'm not writing these characters again, I hate it. Or like when somebody needs to die, kills me.
Oh, it kills them too.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, no, I definitely understand that. And on my more adult, works for older groups of people, I'm not afraid to unalive a person or two throughout the series. And so I understand that too, because there are certain characters and I'm like, I don't want to do this to you, but I need to do this for you. The story's telling me this has to happen, and I'm waiting to hear when my readers are like, why did you do that?
Yeah, it's always kind of like you're afraid, like, ooh, am I unaliving somebody's favorite character? Like, are they just gonna like put down the books series because they just can't? Fortunately, I had one in book 3 in Ranger, the Ranger series. I had a big unalive, and yeah, I was worried about that one, and it just had to happen. So I'm curious, what makes you feel like characters have to be unalived? What's the sort of scenarios that you're like, oh, they have to, this has to be the way it is?
It's I may realize that it will, depending on if one character survives or not, will affect how other characters end and their stories change and how that changes them. So they need maybe a change, and it's unfortunately that one has to go in order for the other one to evolve in a certain way. So that's one way. The other one I have is my series, The Guardian Speaker, is my novella series for mature readers. It's a retelling of Nordic myth. And so some of that is already foretold because it's a retelling. And so I'm like, as much as I made some of these characters lovable, they have to go because that's the story I'm basing it on.
Yeah.
So it's already foretold. I'm not changing that aspect. So that sometimes makes it easier for me because I already had coming in the headspaces, I'm going to make you love them so much. And then you have to say goodbye.
Devious. Oh, that's evil.
I know. Right? I feel like some of the best villains are the authors that write them.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Yeah, no. So that Nordic retelling, that's really interesting to me, like at this particular point, not only because I love Norse myth, but like I just got an idea for an Egyptian sort of mythic retelling. And so, like, what was that process like for you? Like the research into the writing? What was that? What was that like?
Research. I will admit, I am one of those nitpicky people where when I'm doing a retelling, I really want it to be as immersive as possible. So I did spend a number of years, and I have bookshelves dedicated to all the history during the Viking era, all the myths, the sagas, the Eddas, the retellings, from Iceland all the way through the Scandinavian countries, and I deep dove into it for many years. Obsessed, really, because part of my basement has now become a replica of all things Norse with round shields and swords and battle axes and stuff like that. So I kind of went maybe off the deep end on that one, but it was a lot of fun.
Never too much.
It was a lot of fun, and I did enjoy it. But for me, I love mythology. I've always loved mythology. That's how I got into fantasy. I like the myths first and then fantasy second. And so for me, that's an excuse to read what I like. And yeah, Egyptian myth was one of my first favorites. It's why I have a life-size sarcophagus of Tutankhamun in my living room.
Oh my gosh. Your house is the coolest.
So I appreciate anything to do with retellings of Egyptian mythos because there's like the big iconic stories if people are familiar with it. And then there's so many hundreds upon hundreds of other deities that never get the light of day that you could choose and pull from. And so the world is your oyster for that one.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's myth retellings are so interesting. And like, so God of War is one inspiration for me to want to do this because I want to do it in a God of War kind of sense where it's like kind of retelling, but also kind of its own story, right? Have you ever played the God of War games?
I know of them. I have not played them, but everybody said like, if you get into it, check them out because again, the whole mythology and the overlap and yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely doing its own things. Like, right, Kratos is from Greece, right? He's a Spartan warrior. So like, that already is just violating everything. But yeah, no, they're fantastic games. So you should definitely check them out sometime. But I want to do like a similar sort of thing with my Egyptian retelling where it's not, it uses all of the same material. You will see all of the characters that you want to see, all of the sort of like ancient, civilization sort of things. But at the same time, this will not be the myth that you read, right? So I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll get around to it.
I love that. And I kind of like, it's always interesting when it is retelling because you're telling it again in a different way. Whatever your different shtick is, that's what's interesting. And so for me, I did an obscure myth, but I told it from a character that if you know the myth, it's like, why did you choose that one? I'm like, exactly why I chose this one. But I really started some really obscure concepts and made my readers go through this building epic tale to the point where they have to wait till volume 15 out of a 16 volume novella series before they meet Odin.
Like, That's cool.
Everybody's expecting, you know, the big iconic characters, and they have to wait till like the last few. And I did that purposely because I'm like, one, I want you to understand how much other really cool stuff is in this Nordic cosmology.
Yeah.
But then you get your satisfaction of, okay, or maybe not satisfaction because I leave them to the end. I'll be like, here's the big guys.
No, yeah, I think that's perfect because like anticipation is like half the enjoyment of reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that sounds amazing. I'll have to check that out.
Good. And so right now with the series you're working on, is the series called Ranger? No, or that was just the first one.
Right, so it's Ranger of the Titan Wilds is the series title.
Okay, nice. I like that too. So where are you on, like, how far along are you on 4? You said you're working through 4?
Yeah, so it's in editing, or I'm editing it right now, do my self-edit passes. So it's been like the slog of like, oh, getting rid of this comment. So, but I'm getting towards the end of that stage when I'll then do my full kind of read through, smooth out the prose. I really enjoy that stage because it's like, ooh, it's finally becoming a book. So yeah, it's coming along. I'll probably be done with that within a month or so. So yeah, it's coming along.
And when do you have a goal of when you want to publish it? Early next year, end of this year?
Well, the pre-order's for March, so you better be done by then.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're fairly confident, you know, you have a month left of editing and giving yourself a little buffer time, that's actually fairly reasonable once you get the big things done.
Yeah, I mean it's ahead of schedule for usual for me, so I'll take it.
I like it. I wish I could do that. I, at one point, was trying to do pre-orders, but I think I just got so nervous because I never knew what in life was going to occur and flip things on its head. And anytime I did them, I made them all, but the deadlines, but it was just so stressful that at this point, I do the opposite. I'm like, it's out.
Oh, yeah,
I need to work better. I need to work better on releases because I need the build-up, but that's just so bad about that. I'm just like, it's out. We're moving on.
We all have the things we need to work on, right? I mean, like, the pre-order works for me because it doesn't feel too stressful, but it keeps me accountable, right, for the series. So I usually try and do at least the next book in my main active series. But then, you know, I'm writing other books that I like kind of slot away. Like I have the sequel series I mentioned to Legend of Tal. I wrote the first book. The draft is sitting on my hard drive, but I have to do this Ranger book first before I can get around to editing it because of the deadlines. So it just kind of keeps me accountable in publishing.
I love that. And actually going back to Legend of Tal, you were saying that the second book, you have a Kickstarter running right now or soon?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's called Legend of Tal, A Queen's Command, the deluxe edition. So if anybody wants to check it out. Yeah, it's going for the next week still. And yeah, it's done all right. I'm super grateful to the people who have supported and backed it.
That's so cool. I love book Kickstarters. I wish I had enough money to support a lot more.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm like a super backer on there now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't have all that money. But it is, yeah, people are crazy supportive on there, and yeah, it's an amazing platform. Have you run a Kickstarter?
Sorry, what?
Have you run a Kickstarter before?
I have, but I have not done special editions. So I kind of I always write notes about things. So I was like, okay, special editions, yours pretty. I'm going to go pick your brain behind the scenes at some point in the future. Perfect. But yeah, I've never done it for a special edition, which I know it sounds like those do very, very well. I've done the thing which probably you're not supposed to do is I've run them for middle of the series books. And I've heard what you're supposed to do is special editions, standalones, the first one or the last one of a series. But the middle ones are usually where it's hard to get a lot of people's attention because they're like, well, I have to wait for the next one, you know, and depending on how quickly you're turning around books, it may take a while depending on the author. So I get it. I'm learning. I know I can do better. So now I'm waiting to either do like the final or the first or special editions with the fact that I have one completed series and this other one that's about to be completed by the end of the year. I'll have a couple options tentatively for next year to do a special edition release. I just now have to figure out how to make my books look extra pretty. Like yours.
Yeah, I mean, for this I'll throw out my designer's name. So this was Rachel St. Clair did that one. She did. I first found her from Ben Galley's special editions, which have done phenomenally well. Ben was kind of early on the scene, actually, both for Kickstarter and special editions. So I was kind of like, ooh, like what's he doing, right? Like let me follow in his footsteps a little bit. So yeah, I contacted Rachel. She got that done for me. Did a fantastic job. I think the second one actually is even better, which is super fun.
I have to go peek. I'll go peek on your Kickstarter. I know, like I said, at the moment I'm kind of tapped out on funds for fun. Anywho, but I absolutely love it. And you know, when you were saying you're catering for fans who like Tolkien-esque Lord of the Rings style stuff, and that's what it looks like. It really does. That cover is just like perfect, and it's shiny.
yeah, it's got a lot of shine to it. One thing, I guess, to like get behind the scenes a little bit for special edition, since there's so many on the market these days and on Kickstarter, like you kind of have to do what's something that people haven't seen before from a special edition. So what I was kind of banking on here, I'll get it down. For this one was doing 4 different foils. So you could kind of get a lot of different, like a more of a 3D effect than you would usually do from just the shiny. Yeah, there's debossed as well. So having those 4 different foils was kind of like, well, you know, that's something a little different, right? But yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do to do that. I mean, different colors, right? There's a lot of different, if you do print runs, there's a lot of different things you can do with the edges now, including like deboss details where you can, so for example, you got a dragon, right?
Yeah.
You have the dragon kind of scales be like textured and stuff like that along the edge, as well as gilded. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things happening with the special edition market.
Trying to remember who just came out with, oh my goodness, another TikTok author, and Nicole, and blanking on her last name, but she just came out and revealed one of her special editions, and it's really neat because her theory is when the series is complete, all of them, when lined up, will have the 3 different images on the 3 different edges, and so one is like, you know, the character's iconic, some kind of emblem, and another one's, I think, like a dragon, or the city. It's the city that she lives in. And so when you look at it, it's going to, like, you know, instead of like the gold foil, it's going to have, I was just like, y'all, you are so many light years ahead of me. I need to catch up.
I mean,
Hey, Rocco.
Hey, Rocco. Yeah, we're all doing our own things, right? And like, there's no behind, there's no like ahead necessarily. So, but yeah, I mean, special editions are super fun to get done. They are still pretty hot, you know, on Kickstarter. So yeah, I mean, if you can get around to it, it's good stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like collectors, there are definitely people who just want the pretty special covers on their displays, and that's what they hunt for. And plus, as an author, it's really kind of cool to be like, look how pretty my book is.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. It's just, I mean, yeah, that's the main thing with all these pretty things, like the little tokens and the little side things we get done. We just want to have like the pretty thing ourselves, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Okay, let me ask you actually, do you, when you're trying to reach readers, have you ever done in-person events, and if so, what kind? Because there's like solo book signings, there's conventions, there's festivals, and since I've started to get into those kind of things, the convention bracket at least, I'm always curious to hear, do you do in-person events, and if so, what do you do?
Hey, power to you, because I am not doing those events, and I am very scared of those events. I put on a good face, but yeah, I'm very introverted. So doing like a full day sort of book signing thing, I've done it once at Barnes and Noble, and it was fun, but it was exhausting. And yeah, I mean, I need to do it again, but yeah, I haven't really delved into those waters too much. So you said you're doing some now?
Yes, I've started doing more and more of the conventions kind of in my area. And but it's also fun because it's a great way to meet other authors and, you know, connect on just on a more personal face-to-face level. But Yeah, I've enjoyed them, but I also identify as an extreme extrovert. So
Yeah.
when I say if I do a full event and I'm tired, I can't fathom for someone who's introverted trying to do the same thing. So I understand that. Totally
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah.
Though I have seen, if you ever are interested, and you've seen these too, that people will go on lives like here,
Mhm.
and especially if they have their own bookshops, be it through the TikTok shop or their own website, will do
Yeah.
live signings where people, as soon as the order comes in, they'll sign and dedicate it and do live signings
Wow.
that way. And then
That's
you're
fun.
not, yeah, you're controlling the time. You're in your comfy space, and
Right.
but
Yeah,
you
that's
still
really
have the
cool.
opportunity to sign and send. That's if you also do direct sales. That's the only limiting thing.
Yeah. Which are you doing direct? I think I saw you had some TikToks showing that you were doing direct sales now, right?
I am. It's something that I started, I think it was November of last year. I opened up, it wasn't the TikTok shop at that point, but it was like my website's bookshop. And I technically do have the TikTok shop. I just don't promote it because it doesn't like talking to my website right now. And I know I have to spend some time, and I hate techie stuff to figure
Yeah.
that out.
Same.
So I've been pushing that off. Once that's all fixed, I'll probably promote it more because I've released so many books since it's just stopped talking to each other that it's like, it's weird to say, I have the first 3 books of a series, but I've actually written 6 of them, kind of thing. It's like,
Yeah. Sure.
so, but yeah, I do sell directly through my website and have been enjoying it right now, but it's also, I'm not selling thousands of books a day, so it's manageable for me. I would love to have the problem where I have to figure out what to do now because it's too many, but it's still kind of fun just to sign and ship out physical copies, and I also have ebooks and audiobooks now available on it too. So there's the digital stuff for people who
Yeah. Yeah, having like all formats is like I hear is a really big deal. Like I only briefly delved into direct sales and it was fine, it was paying for itself even with those Shopify fees, but it's so much work to
it
like
is, it can
maintain
go.
the techie stuff, keep on top of it. And I was like, ooh, I have Kickstarters running, regular releases. I don't know. I can't do this right now.
Hey, and that's the thing is, again, going back, there are a lot of options out there for authors. You don't have to do it all. I have to repeat this to myself all the time because I try to do it all. I
Okay.
don't need to do it all.
Right.
And that's the thing. Again, if you're doing fantastic with the Kickstarters, you may not need direct sales because that alone has so much time, energy, and effort to behind the scenes that people don't understand how much goes into setting up those, running them, and then sending out, the rewards.
The
It's
fulfillment is a bear for sure. It's a big project. My wife's gonna help me with the next one, which I'm excited about.
yay.
But yeah, it takes weeks and weeks to, especially the fulfillment side of things. But yeah, beforehand, getting all the art in order, getting all the images created, your page set up. Yeah, it's a lot. And I think it kind of it's like maybe you can do both, but you can do one or the other too, because it's essentially direct sales. It's just through Kickstarter's platform and
Yeah.
for a limited period of time. So I was like, okay, this is kind of my direct sales sort of route at the moment. And maybe eventually I'll be able to have a store, maybe when I don't have to manage it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you can choose your route, you can choose your options, and all of them are valid.
I love it. And let me actually, because I just glanced and I was like, man, this hour is moving fast. Okay, so there's always questions that I want to ask, and that's because, one, important for anybody who's listening. Two, if this platform's nice, I'll repurpose this video on my YouTube channel in another couple weeks, and so then people can reference all this kind of stuff, including where can people find and follow you outside of Book Talk, as in other socials, newsletter, do you have a website, that kind of thing.
So we talked about you shouldn't do everything, but I am on all platforms.
See? See?
So I do the bad practice of reposting the same thing on all of them. So
I love that practice. Don't say it's bad.
it's like people say don't use the same thing, and yes, admittedly I tweak. So like Twitter obviously has this like, or X has this like word limit, right? So I'm saying different stuff and I'm posting different tweaked images, but it's basically the same thing. Anyway, so to your question, jdlrosell.com is my hub. So it's the main place you can find everything and find my books and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the best place to go, and you can kind of find the social media and Amazon books and Kickstarters from there.
That's great. And then that also crack. Woo! My voice right there is just crackly. Okay, so the other question I have is where can people buy your books and in what formats do you sell them? Because, you know, again, we mentioned a little earlier on, some people are wide, others are exclusive through Zon, some people do direct. So yeah, what formats and where can people get your books?
Yeah, unfortunately I'm a little bit exclusive in the Amazon sphere at the moment.
It works.
Planning on branching out a little bit beyond Kickstarter. So I like Kickstarter stuff and then Amazon stuff. So yeah, Amazon and Kindle Unlimited are pretty much all my ebooks at the moment. Audible for my audiobooks. And then Kickstarter is where my print books are wide, so you can kind of get them on any online retailer. And then Kickstarter for like special edition stuff and like first look at paperback and hardcover. So
that's so cool. I love it. I absolutely love it. And yeah, because it is interesting because there are so many routes authors can take to distribute books, and yeah, we all want to just find our right readers.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of like you have to choose what's right for you at this moment, right? So even though I don't want to just be so dependent on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited page reads account for about 2/3 of my ebook income. So it's kind of like giving that up for certain series is just like non-tenable for me, right? So especially as like a full-time author, like that's a pretty big risk. So yeah, for me, Kindle Unlimited is the right choice at the moment. But, you know, as payments kind of continue decreasing, which that's been the general trajectory, that calculus changes each time I think about it. So I'll have one trilogy that I'm taking wide, maybe selling direct, kind of like you're doing. And we'll see how that goes. And maybe I'll take more out if that goes well.
And the nice thing about KU versus Audible, I found out. The nice thing about KU is that you can go back and forth. You just have to do the 90 days, you know, hey, I'm rolling out from the program, notify them, wait the 90 days. Then you can do whatever you want. And if that doesn't work, you can put it right back in. They're not going to be like, you can't come back. You can still do that. So if you did want to dabble with one of your series, you can. And if you decide, and it didn't work, yes, you wasted a lot of time setting up and learning out other platforms. True. But you tried, and now you know for sure. And then you can always swing it back. So
yeah, true. You won't want, if your book is selling well on Amazon though, probably don't want to bounce back and forth between, right? Because then you're sort of disrupting Amazon's algorithms, right?
That's true too.
So unless you're really confident, that's the move you want to do. But if it's like with the series I'm taking out, it's not selling a whole lot anyway. There's not a whole lot of page reads, so there's fairly little risk, and you're not going to be disrupting anything. So for that calculus, I'm like, yeah, that works okay.
I like that. And actually, let me ask, because it's always different for every author, is how do you then like to meet and reach new readers? Do you run ads? Is it just through socials? Like, how are you reaching the readers? Is it pure luck?
Luck is always a factor. I think luck is always a factor. So for my initial bump, that was, I was running some ads at the time, but it was for this book, for A King's Bargain, which is the first Legend of Tall book. I released in June 2020. We all know what was happening at that time, right? Very few books were being released during COVID. And so it was able to get more visibility than it otherwise would have, just because of this circumstances. So that was my luck factor. Other than that, I mean, it's been all ads essentially for me. I run a lot of Facebook ads, a decent amount of Amazon ads as well. Those are my two primary platforms. I try and do a decent amount of social media, but as kind of like social media doesn't sell books until it sells books, right? So that's more of like hit or miss. But like my main traffic that day in, day out is through paid advertising.
Oh, that's good to know also, because that's one thing I'm very weak on. I cannot figure it out. But
it takes a lot.
Yeah. And with, at least for me, it just felt like I finally get something and then the algorithm changes and it's just like, no, I lost it. All my hard work and time. And so, yeah, I find it a little frustrating and I wish I was far better at paid advertisements because those who make it work for them really do see the benefit of it. But it's kind of like a hit or miss for me every time.
Yeah, no, it takes a lot of time, a lot of money, unfortunately, and like understanding of the platforms to really make it work on a consistent basis and like continual work. Because like I'm constantly like making new ads, testing new ideas, like it's a never ending cycle. So which is, I'm making it sound really fun, right? But the good part is that if you can get that sort of, I've heard it called a flywheel, I think. I don't know what a flywheel is, but if you can get that little sort of thing churning for you, it can keep churning and you can make a living from it. So that's why I continue to get on that treadmill day in, day out.
Yeah, who knew you were gonna write a fantasy book and then
be a marketer half the time. Yeah, I know. Here we are, the game we play.
Actually, let me go back to your books for a second, because I'm curious. So we said the generalities of epic fantasy and lit RPG. What are your magic systems like? Like, what is the magic of your epic fantasy? Or, tell me.
Yeah. So I guess what I tend to do, I mean, they're all different for each series, right? I'm trying to think of like a general way. I guess what I take is usually like a concept that's been seen before, but then I try and like push it further than what I've seen or push it in a different direction. So I'm usually not doing whole cloth, say like Will White in his one series where he was like imbuing life into objects or something like that, which was like it was like a novel concept at the time for me. I'm usually taking like in the Ranger books, it's life magic generally, but I'm trying to push it in different ways and have different costs to it that you may not have seen before. Okay. So if our Ranger, Leyen, if she's drawing life out of something, if she draws too much out of it, it will die. So that's in that sense, it's kind of Aragon-ish, but I tried to make it more horrific and more telling on both herself, as well as the environment. So so that's kind of what I try to do with a lot of my magic systems. Take a concept, like my rune magic for the Rune War Saga, which is my Norse epic fantasy thing. I wanted to take rune magic, and we kind of have this corridor, which is called the Hall of Doors. And each door activates this different capacity within the humanity, right? So it's not really casting spells like fire or whatever like that, but it's like unlocking human potential within our own minds and bodies. So that's where then we get like a berserker from, right? So a berserker is somebody who has their inhibitions, totally taken away, their strength maximized, their instincts maximized, and that's how we kind of get the classic berserker. So yeah, that's what I kind of like in doing with magic systems.
That's so much fun. I love that. And yeah, those are definitely different, especially the rune magic. I always find that fascinating. Very different than I've heard in the past. And is that one your lit RPG? Because you're sounding like you're okay. I don't know why. It sounded a little bit like I could see that utilized as someone leveling up and yeah.
No, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It could be good for like a game Kickstarter, right?
Hey, there you go.
But no, yeah, that one's just classic epic fantasy, or not classic. It's epic fantasy solidly. It was kind of Skyrim and Game of Thrones and a little bit Dune inspired.
Fun. I love that.
Yeah, the lit RPG one is kind of more classic epic fantasy, so Tolkien-esque in that sense, with a lot of different like creatures. But there's also elves and stuff like that. Yeah.
Of course, you have to have the elves.
Elves.
But let me ask, actually, my questions just skipped me. Oh, point of views. So I kind of mentioned a little earlier that my comfort zone, at least initially, was a single point of view, very, very big cast of characters, but I follow one person throughout. How do you like to tell your stories? Sounding, the epic fantasy side typically does lean to multiple POVs. Do you do that, or did you opt to do a little different route?
I do all of it. At this point, with so many series, you kind of get the option to try a little different thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm kind of like you, where I want to try something different for me, at least, or new with each series. So Legend of Tal is just 2 POVs. Ranger is just 1. The Rune War Saga is up to 8 at the moment, but gonna have more in the next book. The Famine Cycle is just a first-person single POV, and my Lit RPG was also first-person single POV for the most part. There's occasional like third-person interspersed in there with some interludes, but that's just for fun.
I love that, and it is fun to play around with the art of telling a story. Is try things that are a little different than what someone else expects, and it is kind of fun to do that way. But yeah, I've written one standalone with 3 POVs that's on the back burner, and I have yet to gear that one up to move it towards publishing. But I was like, okay, I did 3. I feel okay because I have in the world building process part of it, another very long fantasy series that's going to be D&D meets Witcher, dark fantasy. And I do feel like that one lists to having multiple POVs. I just have to now decide which of the characters I want to be a POV character. But I do feel like to tell that one and actually get a big scope of the world system and everything, I feel like that one almost has to have multiple POVs.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean that's the advantage of multiple POVs, right? Like being able to tell different kinds of stories, right? So you can have like a coming of age arc, like a retired hero arc, whatever you want, right? And like in Game of Thrones, you'll find at least one character that you really, really love, right? And that's why you're reading the series. On the other hand, what I've also found is that in multi-POV stories, you're gonna readers are gonna dislike one character, right? Or they're gonna be not enthused when they get those chapters. So there's like pros and cons and I've kind of tended towards recently that single POV, just because I'm like, okay, they're either gonna like this or not. It's like easy for me to keep my brain wrapped around. But I do love multi-POV ones as well. Because just that grand scope and getting to see all across the land. It's really fun, both for the writer and the reader.
Oh yeah. And it can be fun to jump between different headspaces of different characters because they see the world or worlds, depending on what you're writing, very differently, and how they interact with certain situations can be very, again, foreign to maybe something you've done before. And it's kind of fun to kind of push yourself to really get a whole variety of unique characters. But yeah, for me, single POV is just my comfort zone.
yeah, no, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that too, right? A lot of people love single POV. You really get inside that single character's head too. That's the other thing.
And it's funny because I write third person versus first person. I've only did one short story in first person, and that was so different. And I was like, I'm glad I did that. Not really in love with this style, but I do have this weird fusion. I've noted that multiple readers have commented on where, even though I am third person, I do get into the headspace in a way that's maybe a little more so than expected when it comes to the concept of a third person narrative.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I love just like really limited third person, right? So there's there's omniscient, where you can like head hop, right? Or see outside the character's head. And there's limited third person, I think is what it's called.
I think so. It's been a moment since I've
it's been a moment for me too. Like I've thought about these concepts. But yeah, I always do limited third person. I'm never like thinking outside of the character's head because I want to see their world as they see it. Just tell it in a third person tense, right? Yeah, so it sounds like you're in the same sort of ballpark.
Yeah, when I will have to admit, sometimes when I read books that are the, as you said, the omniscient point of view, where they kind of swirl, and I'm like, wait, we were just here. Where are we going? We come back. I'm like, why was that necessary?
Yeah.
But everybody has to figure out as an author how they want to best tell their story, and sometimes that's the way they choose. Though it feels like a little bit of a roller coaster ride sometimes.
Yeah. And I think about this whenever I counter it in other people's books. And sure, you can make whatever choices you want to make. You just have to be aware of the costs, right? So if you're an omniscient third person and you head hop or you go to somebody without a transition, people are going to be confused automatically. Doesn't matter how smart they are, they're just confused. Like they're not centered in this new character's head. So if you're okay with disorienting your reader, sure, go with omniscient. But there are ways to like, I'm trying to remember, is Terry Pratchett do this? So there's people who can like segue between characters' head spaces and just are so good at character voice. You're like, oh yes, I am in this character's head immediately. So if you're really good at that, sure, omniscient can be really, really effective. But yeah, I think limited third person is much safer. And I think a lot of people tend to like it, especially in modern readers.
Yes, 100% agree. And let me ask, this is one of the things I always like to ask towards the end of the hour is if, and this goes for anybody who's listening as well as you, is there any topics that you wanted to cover that we didn't cover? Any questions you had that you didn't get to ask yet? And any announcements that you wanted to make? So this is that time.
Well, I got my announcement in, the Kickstarter's going.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, were there any questions that I wanted or were you asking other people?
All the above.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I mean, anybody, if they got questions, I'm totally game. Yeah, no, I mean, this has been great. I really enjoyed chatting with you and learning about your books and talking shop. That's the thing. I mean, like authors are scattered all over the place, right? So getting any chance to just talk about the craft and talk about books, it's just a lovely time. So thank you for having me on.
Oh yeah, no, and I try to, I feel like I am a Pokemon trainer, but for authors, I want to catch them all. I want to meet everybody.
Hey, you're an extrovert and it is showing massively.
And so these are my little social outlets with other authors, and I really do enjoy them, and I've learned a lot, and I've made my notes, my weekly notes of everything. So I'm like, special edition's gonna talk to you. Actually, nice. You said, I wanna go back to this. You mentioned that way early on that you were trying to study and then switched poetry, correct?
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, so this is a whole saga. So about when I was graduating college, I kind of had this like gap semester afterwards. I didn't know what I wanted to do. With an English and poli-sci majors, there was no viable job choices, right? So I'm like, what do I really enjoy? What could be my path forward? And so I was considering grad school, naturally, just keep in school if you've been in school your whole life. So I was looking at grad schools. I was considering poetry strongly, just because I've done a lot of it in my creative writing shops in college. And, it's always spoken to me, a certain part. And I try and bring some of that to my fiction writing as well when I can. Though not too much, because like too flowery of language is just like, it gets too much at times. But yeah, so I almost, I did apply to some schools. I had some funding, but it wasn't like fully funded or whatever. I think it was down in North Carolina was one that I was accepted to, but ultimately decided just to do focus on fiction writing in general at my alma mater for my undergrad degree. So I stayed there and was able to get a good deal with doing being a TA and stuff like that. So it was more or less paid for because of that. But yeah, that was the whole poetry saga. I do have some published poems though in like journals and stuff like that. So I was seriously considering it at one point.
Would you ever consider being paid to do poems for someone else's book and be noted as the actual poet of those poems in the book?
Wow, that's a collab. I've never thought about that before. I mean, hey, let's talk.
Just curious. curious because I have a piece that I would love to have, like some poetry being able
Yeah.
to be offered, maybe either in a special edition or back matter of like the printed version or something.
Yeah.
But I'm not a poet.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
But it matters
Hey,
to the
yeah.
story. And so I was like, would anybody want to do this? Who can I hire?
Yeah, let's talk. I mean, that sounds fascinating. I've been meaning to get back into reading poetry anyway. So, hey, this could be a really good excuse.
Hey, there you go. Okay. I made my note. It may be a little bit of time before I get back to it, but I have my note written down.
No problem. That's fun. That's the last thing I expected. I'll be honest when I came on this live with you.
Hey, I love the unexpected things, and they could come in, the idea, like weird ideas that pop in my head, because that happens a lot. But I write fantasy. There's a lot of weird ideas that pop in my head. I just try to utilize as much as possible.
Yep.
But yeah. So thank you for making that little note, because now I'm like, haha.
Yeah, I mean, on just a little anecdote, or not anecdote, but like you mentioned like weird ideas popping into your head. Like fantasy authors, I think about like I've never been drawn to like mushrooms or hallucinogenic drugs because I on the daily have hallucinations of my stories, right? I'm one of those people that like visualizes scenes and visualizes what's going on very vividly often.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, fantasy authors are very weird people.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to like sneak in microphones around the house, because I definitely do have conversations as a character or with my characters. And someone
In the voices, I'm sure, right?
Sorry, what was that?
Doing character voices as well, I'm sure.
Maybe. Well, maybe on occasion. But yeah, things that I don't want necessarily the main world to just stumble upon, they'll be like, are you okay? And I'm like,
Yeah, right.
I write fantasy. Some people are worried about like their search history or research history for fiction writers. And I'm just like, yeah, you just don't.
Stay out of the house. Don't see me when I'm working. Yeah, that's one reason I'll never do like a TikTok live while I'm writing. I can't imagine the atrocities committed on camera.
The problem is I'm just too distracted. I probably, I don't know. Yeah, I think I would be too distracted. I try to do bookish, and this is probably one of the last things, I know I'm drawing it long, bookish crafts live streaming. When I say bookish crafts, because I do now have my bookshop, I do fantasy themed origami that I'll tuck in as like a thank you gift. So I made
that's fun.
I also did, because as an addition kind of spin-off, my husband and I got together and created these 3D printed miniatures of one of my series for like D&D. And so I was like painting them and trying to live stream so I could put them on my shop and stuff like that. But that's hard enough. Trying to actually write a story, I would never get any writing done.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah,
that's true.
Like,
even the artsy stuff. You're just like looking back and forth, right? And just like constantly distracted.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me put my little swipey thing. That's the TikTok timer saying you've reached your goal limit. I'm like, thank you.
We did it.
We did it. But yes, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and coming out and chatting in the middle of the afternoon. Actually, I don't know where you are, so for me it's the middle of the afternoon. But thank you for doing this. And if you ever want to come out and participate in another one of these again, I host them weekly, plan them in advance. But yeah, we just talk books and shop.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks so much, Katharine. It's been a blast.
And have a lovely day for you and everybody else who's been listening. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.